All right, so we're going to get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Clark, and you're in the right place if you're in the 5 days to a 5K donor challenge. I'm going to share my screen, but I wanted to just full screen say hello to everyone, whether you're watching live or you're watching a recording. I just want to thank you so much for joining me in this journey to your 5K donor. I'm going to share my screen. Awesome. So this is 5 days to 5K donor challenge day one. Tonight's focus, in addition to meeting me, and I hope to get to meet you, is that we're going to talk about crafting your magnetic donor story. You want to be able to attract donors by sharing the heart of your mission. And I can't stress the importance of the your mission. If you're a nonprofit leader, you have a mission, a burden on your heart to serve or save a community by your work. And the reason that I put together this challenge is, and we'll talk about it shortly, but so often I meet nonprofit leaders that take their own money out of their own pocket and pour it into a nonprofit. And though I totally get it, I understand it, have done it with organizations that I've worked with, unfortunately, you limit your organization because now it's only limited by the amount of money you have. Now, if you're watching this and you are a multi-millionaire and money's no object in terms of pouring into your nonprofit, first, I want to definitely congratulate you. But second, most nonprofit leaders are dealing with or are pulling from their own reserves. Maybe they work or have businesses. And what a reason I formed this was that I want you to now embark on getting donors. We'll talk about the benefits of donors, the difference between donors and grants. But the real goal is that I want you to be able to really walk out your mission unrestricted, to have the funds that you need to be able to fund your staff, fund your programs, and really take your organization to the next level. So as you watch this, you may be in one of two buckets. Maybe you've never had a donor and you've never had a conversation before, you're in the right place. Or maybe if you had donors and met with them and had some success, but you want to take that donor game to the next level, you're also in the right place. But I did want to introduce myself, and you're like, why should I even listen to this guy? First, thank you for coming out. But a little bit about me, I'm a business and executive coach. So I work with both for-profits and nonprofits. That includes C-suite leaders, founders, executives, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, executive directors on not just pitching and asking for money from donors, but I also coach on leadership, mindset, donor acquisition, messaging, pitch, and confidence more than anything else. I'm also a coach, speaker, and trainer. I reside in Atlanta, Georgia. My beautiful wife, three children, a Doberman, and a little feisty Frenchie. So that's a little bit about me. And I'll tell you, I got my start in fundraising in the film and television space, then brought that over into startups. I've worked with startups that have raised from 10,000 all the way up to $20 million. I've worked with nonprofits that have raised millions of dollars, all the way up to from their first $10 all the way up to millions of dollars. And it's I love what I do because often my work with a nonprofit allows them to increase programs, to increase their reach. And again, my big thing is really just pushing nonprofits to go for those donors, to ask for funding. And tonight, I'll use a couple of words synonymously. So you'll hear me say pitch, uh, giving story. I do look at it as somewhat the same, but do I want you to be salesy, pitchy, forceful? That's not what we're talking about here tonight. What we are talking about is building relationships with donors that are going to be long lasting, that you're going to be able to build relationships, get your programs funded, And I'll talk about the benefits of donors, but get your programs funded and again, take your nonprofit to the next level. Some of the companies that I've worked with, some of my current and past clients include Google, Home Depot Corporate, Thomson Reuters, Name.com, law firms of Morgan Lewis, Simpson Thacher, Wells Fargo, MSNBC, just to name a few. And if you hear some barking, I do have a dog in the next room that might want to bark a little bit, but it'll be totally fine. All right, so again, and the reason I show this, not to show off, but just to let you know that in this challenge, the perspectives that I'm bringing are using corporations, large organizations of various sizes, and this is really meant to position you to raise money and to do well. So to get the most out of today's session, I want you to close any other screens you have. Please take notes, ask questions, but the last two are most important. Please be open to new ideas. I'm going to say some things tonight that you may, or even over the next 5 days, and you may say, wow, I've never heard it put that way, or I don't know if I agree with that. Please be open to new ideas. What I'm showing you tonight is not something I'm testing, but it's something that I actively use with nonprofit clients that have multi-million-dollar budgets. And second, well, next to last is remember that it's not about you. One of the biggest concerns that I hear from nonprofit founders, they say, well, I'm shy. I don't have contacts. I. Well, I want to let you know and let you off the hook. It's not about you. We have these conversations with donors so we can serve the community. So we can serve a community. And there's a community, again, as I mentioned, you're called to serve or save. And that's why we have these donor conversations. And that's all it is. It's a conversation, letting them know who you are, what you do, who you serve. And by the time you get to the quote unquote end of that conversation, they should be leaping in the heart to want to give to you. So that's what will be our focus. So again, remember, it's not about you. I don't want you worrying about, oh, I don't have sales experience. I don't feel comfortable. We're going to work past that in the next 5 days. So here are some of our goals. One, we're going to be talking about a compelling donor story. So you got to understand the components of a compelling donor story. You might be saying, Mike, I already know how to talk about my nonprofit. More often than not, you're talking about it from an insider's perspective because you're just so close to it. I'll ask a nonprofit leader, hey, tell me about your organization. And they'll say, well, what we do is we serve this community and we serve them with PDXJ. We file this form for them. And then what we do is we get them to the SJS system within the Houston Greater Third Ward. And it's all these terms that only they know. Acronyms only they know. Terms of art only they know. So I'll show you how to tell a very compelling, plain language story that someone can connect with. Next, we want to identify the emotions that drive donor engagement. It is an emotional connection that you'll make, and we'll talk about that tonight. And then finally, we want to craft a draft of your own story that appeals to potential donors. We'll have time towards the end and between the next time we meet. I want you to create that draft of a story. Okay. All right. But before we dive in, I have to go after, attack, and destroy the 3 lies about donors. And these are the 3 lies I hear every single day. I meet nonprofits and they're ecstatic about grants. And when I say donors, they stop me in my tracks because these are the 3 things that come up. The first lie is you need to be an extrovert or salesperson to go after donors. I'm not salesy, or built within that, well, it feels like I'm begging. First of all, let me tell you, because you're looking to just build relationship, you're usually meeting with donors one-on-one. You don't have to be this extrovert wild, crazy, stand-up comic type of person. And you definitely don't have to be this pushy salesperson where you're pressuring people. That one, I've never seen that work. And two, that's not what you're going to get over the next 5 days in the challenge. All right. So that's lie number one. If you've ever thought that, you may be saying, hey, I'm an introvert. I don't have any sales experience. Good. Okay. The fact that you're not a salesperson, that means that there's no bad habits we have to get rid of. The fact that you're an introvert, it's totally fine. We'll be doing some practice and some role play along the way. So you'll get some practice and you'll see that each day will build upon itself with confidence and getting you ready. Next, line number two, you need to know wealthy individuals. And that's what I hear too. Someone will say, Mike, I don't know anybody who can write $1 million check. You don't have to. You don't have to. It can be so effective to go to 10 businesses and ask them for $1,000. And if only 20% of them say yes, that's $2,000 for your nonprofit. We have to work the numbers. So you don't have to know wealthy individuals. When we talk about how to identify donors, you'll be shocked. There are donors around you. Okay. And again, I want to separate donation from donors. There are people that'll give you those one-off donations, but we're talking about donors, primary donors that'll give you the larger sums, or there'll be donor partners that'll commit to you over a period of time. Okay. All right. So the next lie that we absolutely have to get rid of is that your nonprofit has to be doing amazingly successful to get a donor. So that falls out like this. Well, we just started, so there's no way I can ask for a donation. Not at all. I have seen nonprofits that literally the ink is still wet on their paperwork, but they have a program planned out. They have a vision that they want to execute. Maybe they even have some previous work that they did as traction and impact before they even filed their nonprofit. And they connect with a local restaurant that's willing to do a co-sponsorship, maybe a 20% revenue off of wing night or Taco Tuesdays. You'd be shocked. You don't have to. Now, there are some, and let's separate grants from donors, because many times I have this conversation, they say, well, grants, aren't you supposed to have been up and running for 3 years? This is not, that's a different with donors. There isn't a requirement of being up and running and have filed, and there's not that requirement. It's unrestricted funds. That's the beauty about going after donors. And our goal during the 5 days is to go after and get our first 5K donor. Okay, we're going to be able to identify who they are. We're going to figure out what to say. I'm going to tell you what to say and show you how to build that story. That's where we start off tonight. And then we're going to go into setting that meeting so you can get that first 5K donor. All right, so we've got the lies out of the way. So if these were in your head in any way, shape, or form, they're gone. Let's get rid of them. They're done. All right. So one, don't need to be an extroverted salesperson. You don't need to know wealthy individuals. And your nonprofit doesn't have to be some amazing up and running nonprofit. We serve 1,000 people. The one caveat to that lie number 3 is that you should have your nonprofit filed, though. That's one thing I'm going to say. I meet a lot of leaders and they'll say, yeah, I've got a nonprofit, but they actually don't have it filed. They haven't submitted the paperwork to have an established, legitimate nonprofit. I do want you to have the nonprofit in place before going after donors. All right, so why go after donors? One, and this is the big one, it's unrestricted funding. With grants, you're limited in terms of what you can do with the money. If you if you submitted for a grant and it's for you to run a program out of a local park for youth, it has to go towards a program in the local park for youth. Okay, you can't have it be For a senior center and somewhere else, it's earmarked. And there are rules you have to follow with grants. Donors unrestricted. Now, does that mean that we can spend it on something outside of the nonprofit? No. Within the nonprofit, and according to rules and laws, of course, but you can spend it on the program you choose and on the expense that you choose within the nonprofit. So unrestricted, big one. It's available 365 days a year. Grants have deadlines. Grants are open for certain windows of time. Donors, you can have that conversation on Thanksgiving, on Christmas, Hanukkah. You can have the conversation July 4th. You could be anywhere in the world and have a donor conversation and receive a check or money from a donor. It's not restricted by time. And compared to grants, I will tell you, less competitive. You may submit for a grant and be competing with 10,000 other people. When you're asking or speaking to a donor, the competition is very small. It's faster. If I apply for a grant today, depending on the grant, I may not hear for 90 days, 6 months, or even a year. With donors, you usually hear during the conversation or 24, 48 hours later, maybe a week later, but you know almost right away whether you've got it or not. Less complex. It is less complex to have a conversation. Again, I'll give you the building blocks over the next 5 days. Make sure you don't miss a day, but less complex. I've seen grants, and I know plenty of grant writers that spend 20, 30, 40 hours on a grant application. That's competitive, that I may not hear back from in a year. Now, do I have clients that have received $1.2, $1.9 million in grants? Absolutely. And they are amazing. But the great thing is that while you're waiting to hear back from a grant, you can be having donor conversations. I heard an interesting rule of thumb that 80% of your budget should come from donors. And for some of you, you're breathing a sigh of relief. Others that are watching or listening, you may be like, oh my God, I'm nowhere near that. Well, that's why we're here. We can focus in on grants and focus in on donors. And the reason I mentioned grants is that there are some grants that the grant may be 250,000, and the fact that you have 100,000 in the bank would be a plus for that grant. Many times when you apply for a grant, they want to know what other sources of revenue do you have? And when you say, well, just other grants, sometimes you could be rejected for a grant. Many grantors want to know that you can sustain without them, and that they're not the sole source of revenue for the organization. Reliability and stability. They are reliable. Many times donors will commit to annual giving. When we talk about follow-up and you have a donor that gives to the organization, then in turn, you're able to stay in contact with them, send them a newsletter, show them pictures of the impact that their donation meant. That builds reliability. They can count on you, builds trust. And the stability of it is, again, as you go from year to year with the budget. I have many nonprofit clients that have donors that they know they can go back to year after year after year. And some of those donations are $100 and some of them are in the thousands and six figures or more. And depending on when you're watching this, 26% of giving is done in December. So if you're watching this and it's November, then yes, you've got time, because within the next 60 days, almost 26% of all the annual giving is done in December. So the fact that you're watching this now in the 5-day challenge is going to give you all of December to just knock it out the park, have a bunch of donor conversations. And as I mentioned in point 2, this is available to you for 365 days a year, 12 months a year. you can have donor conversations continually. Okay. If you're watching this and it's January, February, well, that just means that you've got more time to build impact, more time to have conversations, and leading up to December, know that you'll again be able to knock it out the park. Donors love tax deductions. They love, love, love tax deductions. So that is another big selling point. Remember, I said it's not about you. None of this is putting stress or a burden on you, right? So donors love tax deductions. Remember that. It's one of the incentives when we're having those donor conversations. All right, so let's dig in why your donor story is a game changer. When you have a compelling donor story, this is your pitch. Remember, I told you I was going to use those words synonymously. This is your, when you meet with a donor, your story that you tell. Donor stories build emotional connections. When they find out your why you started the organization, the impact you have, it builds an emotional connection. And stories communicate purpose and impact. Notice I didn't say stories communicate facts and figures, okay? Because too often I find nonprofit leaders get really bogged down in the, well, we serve this many and that's good. That's impact. But when you can tell a story about a gentleman that came into your group home, changed his life, turned everything around. Now he invests in real estate. Now he has several group homes. Being able to tell turnaround stories, a family that came into your in contact with your organization. Now their life is totally turned around. So those stories tell about your purpose and impact, and they differentiate you from your nonprofits, differentiate your nonprofit from others. And that's important because too often we'll say, oh, we're a nonprofit, it's a group home, it's very similar, it's transitional housing. But what makes your transitional housing different? I ran into a client that was doing transitional housing, and one of the things that made theirs different was the amount of programming and education they offered the residents. It was just something I'd never heard before. So you want to be able to articulate what makes your nonprofit different, and we do that within the story. So here we go. Please take notes. You can take screenshots. Key ingredients of a powerful story. Now, before I show you these, you may have said to yourself, well, hey, I can tell my story. Couple of things stories from nonprofit leaders often have a lot of extra detail, roundabout stories. So one of the things that we're going to stress, and you'll see this during the week, is that you should be able to tell this story in a very concise way, not using any jargon or technical terms, but in a very down to earth and concise way. Okay. So when we look at these powerful ingredients, I want you to, again, in the beginning, I said, I want you to look at this with an open mind, and this is where it really starts. Purpose, why your organization exists. Now, that's different from what you do. Why does it exist? We exist to eradicate homelessness in LA County. We exist to destroy malnourishment in kids in Houston. We exist. Why do you exist? Again, different from what you do, how you do it, not process. This is purpose. Mission impact, the real change your nonprofit is creating. That's what donors want to hear. They want to hear why you exist. And they want to hear the real change your nonprofit is creating. Not just a change, meaning in these stories, we get specific. So we'll say we have several residents that are now working, making 5 and 6 figures that have turned their lives around, that are now working in the group home, that are being specific is so important. So talking about that real change, the impact. And yes, is it numbers and stats? Yes, but it's also real people. So what can that look like even from a marketing perspective? Case studies. To protect privacy and anonymity, of course, we can sometimes we have to replace names, but know that people want to hear what change and what impact you've made. We have to have authenticity, be real and relatable. Be real, just saying, hey, when we came in that night, we broke down and cried. Because if it's true, and nowhere in this is am I saying fake it till you make it, act. No. Transparency, authenticity, be real and relatable. And that also means that we're not just going to shape a narrative that just sounds really nice, something cranked out of Chat GPT with all these details. No, be real and relatable. Next, we definitely need a call to action, clear steps for donors to get involved. That one is important because so often I'll sit down with someone else and I'm listening. I hear their purpose, what their mission impact is. I hear authenticity. And then at the very end, it's just like, okay, so if you'd like, I can let you think it over and then we can chat next week. Well, chat next week about what? Sometimes you have to give, well, not sometimes, we have to give our donors a clear steps for them to get involved. And what does that look like? Well, as a partner, that would mean a donation of $10,000 annually. We can, of course, send over all the information in a packet. I'd like to do a follow-up meeting with you on Friday. So letting them know exactly what the next steps are key. And those next steps, there should be very little friction in that. So, and the reason I'm saying that is that we just simply, oh, well, I'd love to be able to do a follow meeting with you on Monday. How's 2 o'clock? Okay. So we want to hear the purpose, the why your organization exists, the real change your nonprofit is creating, authenticity, and a clear call to action. All right, so let's break that down. Defining your purpose. This is going to be the core reason for your mission. Why does it matter, and why does it matter to you and others? So here in the challenge, we can start this now. You can screenshot this, but this will be a part of your homework. What's the story behind why you started? Was it because I met with someone just today who wants to open up some transitional housing because of a journey that they had been on, some challenges they faced. So being able to know the story behind why you started, and maybe it's not tied in with you, maybe it's a family member. Now, one thing caveat I'll have to say here is that if there's parts of the story that are embarrassing in any way or uh, maybe disclose too much information, create a version of the story that is for public consumption. So I work with individuals that were formerly incarcerated that have organizations. They don't get into the gory details of their entire past, but they will say, hey, having been formerly incarcerated, I know what it is to come through the transitional housing system. And in this county, it was just a shambles. I had to wait 60 days. But then when I got there, the place was a mess. And now I started my own. So you see, I'm telling a story of why, but again, you don't have to tell every intricate detail. All right. So we want to know when you define that purpose, think of the core reason for your mission. And this is not just restating your mission statement. We can see your mission statement on your website. This is not restating your vision. We can see it on your website. But when I meet with you one-on-one, I want to hear, hey, what's the story behind why you started? And donors may not come out and ask you, but that's what they want to hear. All right, so demonstrating impact. We're going to do this by showing real life examples and outcomes. And again, you don't have to use names. You can say, we had a young lady who was 16 who came into our home. So much going on at home. She was brought over in the middle of the night. We worked with her over a period of 6 weeks. Now she's just so much more confident. She's really breaking out of her shell. We were able to get her into several programs within the local school. So real life examples and outcomes. That's another thing too. So to be able to say, oh yeah, we have many, several people that we help. Okay, you help them, but what is the outcome? So make sure when we're talking impact that we know at least part of the end of the story. Again, this is a journey, of course, and you can't tell the future, but we do want to know what were some of the outcomes. Next, you want to make it tangible. Use names with permission, or from a standpoint of ethics, you can simply replace the name. You can say, we had a young lady come through our system. We'll call her Janet. We were working with a gentleman. We'll just call him Danny. And then people understand that. People know. But you do want to be specific in the outcome. Again, from a standpoint of ethics, we don't want to connect any outcomes, that might have been in the news or anything like that people could connect to the real person, but we do want to make it tangible. And the reason that we're taking these steps is that you never know. Okay, I'll take a step back. When we're demonstrating impact using real life examples, we're also building that emotional connection with the donor. You never know what donors have gone through, experienced, know of, have a burden for. And more often than not, I've heard donors say, one of the reasons I gave is that I had an aunt that suffered with the same thing. I had an uncle that was in the same situation. Oh, my dad's a veteran. I love the fact that you help veterans. So that's why we want to show real life examples, because we never know where we're going to make that connection to. Describe what happens when donors contribute. Let them know. Say, when you give, it allows us to build an additional home, to bring in an additional resident. It allows us to be able to throw a 20-member function or 20-student training session. Let them know what the transfer is. When donors contribute, we're able to keep our program up and running in LA County that serves 500 youth. That's impact. Don't ever assume that someone is just going to make they'll do the math. We help 10,000 kids and we're asking for $100,000, so they'll do the math. No, do the math for them. Tell the story. Here's an action step for you. How has your organization impacted lives or communities? So you want to just write that out in a narrative, not long. I'm talking anywhere from 3 to 5 sentences, and less is more. So you want to write it out. Okay. And if there's a story in there about someone, you can write out the story in more detail. But we want to know how your organization has impacted lives and communities. That's what donors care about. Okay. All right, next, authenticity. Be relatable, honest. Share real challenges and triumphs of your organization. If I had $10 for every time I met a nonprofit leader that just described their nonprofit, well, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, and that's great. But also, too, I want to know, well, what are the challenges? I want to know the challenges and the triumphs, not just the triumphs. Okay. And then when donors hear those challenges, I've also found that many times donors will take that as a call to action. Well, one of the real challenges we have is that the house that we have on Figueroa, it's filled to capacity and there's a waiting list. Donor thinks to his or herself, wait a minute, I have access to real estate and I have several people selling properties that could potentially be a group home. So when I mention that challenge, you never know where it can go, how it can potentially be resolved with that donor conversation. not just by money, sometimes introduction or other resources. Overly polished stories, avoid them. Please avoid overly polished stories. Just speak from your heart. Now, the balance this out. Do I want you to memorize it? Yes, because I don't want you telling the story if you're asked 15 times, you tell it 15 different ways, and you have to think, well, then no, you should be able to have your stories in your heart. Just a good example for those that are watching. What's your mission statement? Do you know it by heart? Everyone who's a nonprofit leader, you should know your mission statements by heart. Just like we know these stories by heart. Why? Because they're impactful, they're meaningful. And you want to show the real side. Don't try to fake it. Just show, hey, we lost a couple of volunteers last week, but we're doing this. Be real. Highlight shared values with potential donors. Sometimes you may find a good example. We just had Veterans Day. So if you know or find out that your potential donor is a veteran and you help veterans, make that connection. So the action step, how can you connect with donors on a human level? I want you to list and I want you to list a couple examples of how you can relate on a human level. Maybe it's based on who you serve. Maybe it's sharing some of your challenges and triumphs, of course. And you might just say, hey, being real about the housing situation, being real that we have a debt shortfall, being real. Okay. All right. And this final piece is that you want to we're creating a clear call to action. They should know exactly what's the next step. That's why I love this graphic, right? Everybody's pointing one way, but that's our donor in red. They're not going the right way. So it's up to us to direct them. So we want to be specific. Donate now to support X. Join us in creating Y. Join us in creating a safer LA County. Donate now to support our summer program that'll send 200 youths to Yosemite National Park. And we want to make it easy for them to act. So that means that, okay, what I'll do is I'll send over a donor packet. You'll get that in the mail. It's a one pager, just really spelling everything out. And we do want to inspire urgency. And that's not going to be done in a pressure-filled way. We want to do it in a way that just, again, let them know. And the reason we're stressing is, I'll take a step back. If you have the conversation and people feel like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, send it to me. I'll look it over. No worries. Well, the most subtle way you can create a sense of urgency is to say, no problem, I can send it. When's a good time to follow up? Oh, well, I'll look at it. Okay, no worries. Well, with our donors, we do want to, we're really pushing to get all our partners on board by December 15th. That's sense of urgency. Now, did I say, hey, when I send that over, you better send the money back? No, we're not being forward like that. But we do want to let them know that there's a sense of urgency. Otherwise, it's just the nature of people. They'll drag it out. They're busy. They're busy. And so again, we tell them specifically what they're donating to. Okay. And the word that I like to use is partner. Essentially, one perspective is that if you say, well, if you partner with us, that would mean a donation of $10,000, $1,000 annually. It might mean a monthly gift of $250. So being able to articulate it out specifically. So again, remember I said partnering with us would mean. So these are little sound bites that are just helpful. It makes the conversation so much smoother. And it is one that we'll practice, and you'll see we'll practice it this week. All right, so that is the end of the presentation of the slide. So what's going to happen is I'm going to send you out an email shortly after we're done, with your homework, with the bullet points. And what I want you to do is, and it'll be a Google Doc. So you'll do file, copy, save it. And I want you to start to create your donor story with the authenticity, with the impact, figuring out how can I be real? How can I tell this story? I don't want you to just do it on your own. And I'm going to give you a Google Doc that'll walk it out. You'll get it about 30 minutes or so after we'll close out. If you're watching this in the recording, I'm sure the link will be somewhere around the video. But I do want to thank you. Tomorrow in day two, we're going to talk about how we find these donors. You do not want to miss it because we're going to create this amazing story, but who are we going to deliver this giving opportunity to? And I will, if you trust me, if you come along for the ride in the next session, you'll leave with a list. And I can almost guarantee a list of at least 10 donors that you'll be able to approach. 10? Yeah, I would say 10, if not more, but definitely 10 at the end of the session on day two. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap it up here. I look forward to seeing you on day two. Again, my name is Michael Clark, Personality Pitching. You'll get a link, or it'll be the next video for you to watch in day two. But thank you so much. I'm going to end it now for those that are in the recording. Those that are here live, please stay in the room and I'll be available for questions.